My name is Yara. It's good to be back with y'all. Got a new setup. Shout out to my school. They have a podcast room, and today we're going to be using this space to discuss gender. So, I think something that's really fascinating about my subscribers is a lot of y'all are male, according to, YouTube analytics. And, I really just want to take advantage of this privilege of, having people present and listening. And to really just, shape and challenge perspectives. So today we're going to be talking about gender. And the reason why this has been on my mind so much lately, let me make sure I'm speaking into my little mic. The reason why I've been thinking about this lately is because I'll be off social media for like weeks at a time. And then I'll go back on, and there's so much like man hating rhetoric. And I think that is just like fascinating because I used to hate men. Okay. I used to really feel very passionately about this. And I don't even know why because my father is a very loving person, but honestly, I do kind of know why. It's because I would see my father as more feminine, and I hated the concept of masculinity itself, not actually hating men, but hating the concepts of domination, control, like feeling like I'm not allowed to be lazy and have to be always active. So I kind of took my frustration for that and really projected it on to patriarchy, which is indeed violent. Like there's not these feelings that I had didn't just exist in a void of like anger, like I'm angry for no reason. Like, one of my close friends growing up, she was dealing with sexual assault at like just such a young age, and it like really infuriated me that we're only 13 and she's already being violated by someone that told her that they loved her. And I just didn't understand how violence and love were supposed to be coexisting. And I feel like we're too often taught to accept that in patriarchy. So I think a big part of understanding these concepts and the whole point of even discussion is the potential to change what does this mean to us and how can it improve and what is the idealized dynamic instead of getting stuck in this rhetoric of whatever the algorithm is showing us that oh, women just want to use men. She just wants you to buy her shit. He just wants to have sex with you. Instead of getting stuck in this rhetoric, as a human being, we all have the power to choose how we connect with people, choose how we see people. And so that's the aims of this discussion today. So I want to start off by discussing what is gender? Does it even exist? Who knows? um, so there's so many different perspectives of how we can define gender. There is, well, I'll start by talking about biology. So, especially in the queer lens of understanding our world. And I will say, like, I am a Gen Zer, but I am not up to date on all the lingo. So, very well could be out of date in some ways. But, there's gender and then there's sex. So, sex is whether you're male or female. And then there's also intersex, which is people that have like both body parts or like certain high levels of testosterone or estrogen that kind of affect their like sexual identity and expression, I guess. And then there's gender, which is about the spectrum of masculine and feminine, and essentially like thinking of these as more like poles rather than definitive categories. So in the poles of masculine to feminine, in the middle, there could be like non-binary people, two-spirited people, and so on. I actually took a really fun class called like "What is Shamanism," and we talked about how in India and other countries throughout the world, before like colonization, they actually had like multiple gender categories, which also in the Americas with indigenous people, that's what being two spirited is, having both. But I think the one in India really stood out to me because there were like multiple different definitions. Like you could be like a girl, girl. I don't remember what the words were, so I'll have to do some further research on that. But there were like five different categories of like ways in which you could express the masculine just a little bit, or you could express your femininity just a little bit, or you could be like right in the middle. So I thought that was really interesting. Yeah, so that's kind of what gender and sex is, how I conceptualize it, especially being queer and trying to be respectful of how different people express things. But I think I love the concept of like transgenderism because some queer people are like, um, which I feel like I used to say this sometimes, like gender does not exist. Or I think RuPaul said every day we put on drag, something like this. I low-key want to look that up because it was such a good quote. Every day we put on drag, and it's just kind of the idea that like every day we're just humans waking up, getting dressed, trying to feel good, and we're just putting on clothes, we're doing our hair, putting on jewelry, we're adding these layers to ourselves to try and create a performance essentially. Like we're constantly performing for others. But if there are no other people, are you gendered? I think that's up for debate. I would argue no. Like, we all piss, we all shit, we all just sleep. It's not like these things are particularly different. But then at the same time, I will say sometimes I do feel like gender is more, maybe, I'm not sure if real is the word so much as definitive. Because I do feel like as a woman who bleeds, I feel like it makes me feel very spiritual. I feel like it grounds me to the cycles of life. And one of my favorite quotes is from an Alice Walker book. It's one of my favorite books that I've ever read. It's called By the Light of My Father's Smile. And she says, women know blood through bleeding on their periods, and men can only know blood through war. And that's why they seek it, because they crave to know the life force. And we know our life force through the natural rhythms of life. But if they wish to see life force blood, then they must create destruction. And that, I mean, Alice Walker is definitely a womanish. She definitely like spearheaded this movement. Womanism is, um, it's essentially like black radical feminism, but the idea is that it's inclusive of all women all over the world, especially like taking into account indigenous women and different perspectives of what it means to be feminine, and how the feminine is deeply grounded in nature. And so in the feminist movement, that's kind of, at least when it was starting, and that's why Alice Walker was responding to it in the feminist movement, is more, maybe a bit more academic, definitely more spearheaded by white women. and therefore less inclusive. And the things that white women seek in terms of equality are not inclusive of what women all over the world need for equality. So, an example of that would be like, um, for example, the feminist movement started with a lot of housewives being depressed in suburbia because they felt isolated. And then their husbands would be like abusive, and they didn't have any resources or community to reach out to for help. And of course, that's going to resonate with women all over the world. But in America, that was a very, when you take in the aspect of race, Black women were working. So there wasn't this same isolation. Um, so while uh, white women were advocating for, um, you know, stopping the isolation, having resources, creating community. Black women are were championing for at the same time racial equality and women's equality. And so what that meant was asking for fair wages with, you know, their white counterparts, but also with being a woman compared to black men. And so essentially, womanism is supposed to be more inclusive of what needs to be done in order to promote and to embolden the feminine. And so those are just some thoughts about what is gender, does it exist, how is it different from sex? In yogi philosophy, so I am a yoga teacher, and during my training we talked about gender, and I remember one of my peers, shout out to John, gonna be name dropping all the homies that definitely inspired any of these thoughts. He was telling us, so we were talking about yoga, right? And one of the breath works that we do is called Nadi Shodhana, where you inhale into your left nostril, exhale into your right, inhale to the right, exhale to the left. And so the whole concept here is that our left body is our feminine side and our right body is our masculine side. And by doing this breath work, we are bridging the connection between these two polarities and creating balance in the body. And so while we were doing this, John had a problem with it. He's like, I don't believe in gender. Gender is not real. Like this, I have 3 daughters. Why should I tell them what femininity means? This is all made up. And my yoga teacher David was like, well, I hear you, and the whole point is not to tell you what femininity is or is not, or what masculinity is or is not. The purpose of this is to recognize the distinction between the poles and to attempt to find the middle ground, to attempt to find balance within whatever these oppositions are. And so essentially, he's making the point that gender is not about definitive separate categories. It's about how, as humans, we are able to perceive opposition. And that because we're able to perceive this opposition of the poles, we are also able to find the center. And so, I'll just kind of say like what I think femininity means to me and what masculinity means to me, but this is all open to interpretation. It's definitely more so just about opposition. And so, how I think of femininity, I think a lot about, like I was talking about, like menstruating, the cyclical nature of that is how I start to dive into my comprehension of what femininity is. And as well as um, nature, looking at nature and seeing like how do like the female ducks dance? How do the male ducks dance? Which ones look a certain way? What does that mean? I think that that's why gender is just so fun because you can just play with it and you're free to do so. And if anyone tells you you're not, they're lying to you. Because thinking about how in like our human culture, it's women generally tend to dress up. We tend to um, put on makeup, wear gowns, get our hair done, do all of this things to beautify and signal our like majestic nature versus ducks. If you ever look at ducks, the brown ones will kind of I don't know, like in the Dawn commercial, that's a female duck. They're brown, you know, they're beautiful. But then the male ducks, they have the green heads, and it's like it's a statement, you know. They're saying something with their presence, um, which similar to peacocks. I'm pretty sure I might be wrong, but there's different birds that and animals in general where it's usually the males that will like flaunt um, in order to like attract a mate. And so I don't know. I think that's just kind of interesting. Like, it's in terms of gender, I often think about how our world, especially like when you think about how we live, I live in the US empire, and what are the cultural signifiers of that? And are these signifiers generally meant to bring alignment to the internal self? And I would argue no. And therefore, how are things skewed in a certain way to create separation, maybe from what is natural, but also from like my body and my spirit? And so sometimes I just feel like the world is very backwards. And so even thinking about like the animal kingdom, which I'm sure that there are female animals that also flaunt what they got. So I would have to do more research into that. I'm not completely sure about that one, but I guess what I was getting at here is sometimes I feel like our world is very backwards. Like we do everything like in opposition to nature, and it creates this confusion within the self of like, who am I? What am I being forced into? And things just become very mumbled and unclear. And so I just wonder, is men like like in traditionally in my culture, I would say men do not really feel pressured to beautify themselves, but like women do. So if the male birds are flaunting and the females aren't, but then in the humans, like the women are flaunting and the men aren't, are we backwards, or is this just who we are? But I love beauty, and I'm definitely gonna talk about beauty another day, because there's just something so sacred about beauty, and like it doesn't, again, like gender, it doesn't mean anything inherently, but we give it meaning. And I mean, I know how I feel when I see something, someone, hear something, feel something that is beautiful, and it's just such a gift. And that's definitely something I want to discuss in the future. So yes. So I would say if I were to summarize like in my perspective, I would say femininity tends to be more cyclical, more passive, more grounded. You can also think about these things in terms of elements and like trying to fit them into those categories. So I know traditionally that um, water and earth are considered the more feminine elements. And so taking that a step further, like flow is a word I would associate with femininity, like the natural movement of water, groundedness in terms of earth, and the multiplier. So, and receptive. I think those are definitely big keywords that stand out to me in terms of femininity. And you can also think about that in terms of like biology and sex. And so, like, when creating children, like, women receive a seed and then they multiply and create. And so there's also like this very like creative force, but that's also with the synthesis of these two polarities. Um, but I would argue that like maybe it's the feminine that is like, if you also like math, I would think of the feminine as like the function and the masculine as like the input. And so with that, defining like in terms of opposition, I think of the masculine as more active, um, more concentrated, um, and with the elements, that would be fire and air. And so that rules like thought and passion, um, and intensity is another word that I think of, especially with those two elements. Yeah, so those are just some different ways of thinking about gender, especially in terms of like yogi philosophy and like more spiritual philosophy. And lastly, I want to talk about the Kabbalion and the law of gender. So, in the book, The Kabbalion, they go over 7 laws of the universe, and might be the last one, I might be wrong. Um, there is the law of gender, and the law of gender loosely states that through connection between the masculine and the feminine, there are new layers of reality revealed, or through the synthesis of masculine and feminine, there's creation and new. And so, like I was kind of saying earlier, you could think of that in like childbirth, but um, even I am a jury maker. Like I made this, and when I start with a piece, I am in my thoughts, in my masculine thinking, and then but that's actually interesting. Thinking, yes, but then I would say even before thinking, I'm invoking my imagination and connecting with my subconscious, which I would say is more feminine. And so, like, just getting to a state where, like, I am not forcing shit. I'm just sketching and doing what feels right, what feels intuitive, what is flowing through me, getting in tune with that. I would say that's like embracing my feminine. And then I think about, okay, how do I bring this image in my head into the material? I would say as I transition this idea into bringing it into fruition, that I'm engaging more with the masculine of like the actively doing, the sketching it out and then cutting it out. But there needs to be both in order for creation to occur. And so therefore, like the law of gender can talk about like how we create humans, but it's really about everything. Everything that we see in reality was once um, in the mental plane. It was somebody's idea. Somebody thought about this microphone and they're like, what if I had a device that could pick up what I was saying? Like just letting things flow. And I think that even connects to like I think there's such a mysteriousness in femininity. which I just love and appreciate. Um, there's something about it that just cannot be understood. We have to just let it dance through us. Because where does that come from? Where does that desire, where does that idea come from? We literally don't know and we can't know, but there's just something within us on a deep level that speaks to us and tells us that this is possible. I can bring this into fruition. Yeah. Um so I will say, like, this is definitely what I think about gender, and I think about this a lot in my personal life. How am I balancing my energies of my masculine and feminine? And in a patriarchal world where I am constantly expected to be doing, I have to really step back and remind myself that I am allowed to soften. I am allowed to rest. I am allowed to feel grounded. I do not need to commit actions in order to feel value, that my value is inherent, that there is something within me that understands, there's something within me deeply intuitive, that my spirit is present, and that in and of itself it is more than enough, and that I do not need to do anything on the material in order to prove the validity of my spirit, in order to prove the worthiness of my spirit, in order to prove the value of my spirit. Like, it already is. So that's something that I have to work towards, because our culture, my culture that I view around, does not encourage that. I am constantly, especially being a student, and I'm so excited to finish. I'm in my last semester at school, alhamdulillah. As I'm wrapping up school, I'm definitely just really excited to embrace my femininity. School puts me in a very masculine mode where, turn this in, do this. Are you applying to stuff? Are you doing enough? And it's great. I love opportunities. I love my life. I am so grateful for everything that I have and everything that I work towards, but I'm definitely seeking more of a balance. And so, like I was saying, on social media, so in real life I'll be working towards this, but then I'll go on social media and I'll see a crazy article trending, like on Vogue, why it's embarrassing to have a boyfriend. Like, guys, who is writing this stuff? But like, I get the rhetoric because we live in patriarchy, right? And there are a lot of things that I don't. Okay, yes, the manosphere is a lot. Incels are a lot. People talking on the internet is a lot. But at the same time, to say that having someone that loves you is embarrassing, I'm just like, oh my God. Like, this is a slippery slope. But way to push the gay agenda. I love it. I didn't even read the article, so I really don't know if that's even in any way, shape, or form what the tone was. But I kind of get it just by scrolling on social media and seeing all this content of like, um, never tell a man what you really think or feel. Just have him buy you stuff. Never tell him about your last relationship. He will just use it to manipulate you. I'm like, oh my God. This is so pessimistic. And I hear you, and I know that some people do that. That is absolutely true. And at the same time, there are infinitely just as many people that do not do that. Like, I am definitely a firm believer in, like, what is the term? Like attracts like, and as above, so below. So if I'm like everybody's just gonna manipulate me. So I have to manipulate them first. I have to lie to them about what I think and feel in order for them to give me what I want. Then I'm just going to attract people that are lying to me and think the same way. Like, you and maybe I won't, maybe I would find someone, but then I wouldn't even like that because then I would be manipulating someone that doesn't deserve it. So why not just like seek out people that you don't feel the need to manipulate? But maybe I'm asking for too much from our culture. Who knows? But with that, like I said, I've been seeing so much of this content, and I know it's because the algorithm tries to do things, rage bait, get us to watch things that will catch our attention. Um, but I really believe that this is speaking to polarization in our society, creating these poles of gender, but really there's so many poles, especially in America or the United States. Um, there's so many poles that we use to separate ourselves: male, female, feminine, masculine, red, blue, left, right, black, white, colored, not colored, religious, not religious, Christian, Muslim, Abrahamic, other, like there's so many things that we can use to separate ourselves, but I think the gender war is so effective because everybody has a relationship with gender. Not everybody has a relationship with religion. Not everybody has a political identity, but everybody, which I mean, I think that's debatable of whether or not people are always interacting with everything, religion, politics, whatever. But what I'm saying is not everybody is connected to that identity, but we all are forced to be connected to our gender. When you walk to the restroom, you're aware of your gender. When you're a woman and like the opposite, or when you're either gender and the opposite sex looks at you, you're probably more aware of your gender. These things are just, I don't know. I think gender, which I took a philosophy class, and this woman made a really fascinating argument that there is no culture of femininity versus the other identities. They have culture. So like, the left, they're more blue, they're more altruistic, blah blah blah. Don't even think that's true, but that's the idea of what the culture is. And she argued that being a woman, there is no shared culture. But I honestly disagree with that. I think we can define culture in many ways, but as a woman, being connected to bleeding and therefore cleanliness, like I feel like those two things are inherently quite connected, and kind of lost where I was going with that, but we're gonna just let that go. Um, with the gender wars, I just want to say this. Any rhetoric that does not uplift you, you do not need to listen to. And one of my favorite YouTubers is Nero. Shout out to my king. And he often says something along the lines of all truths are half truths. And any belief that you hold that does not bring you to your desired reality is meant to control you. So let's just really linger on that. Any belief you hold that is not meant to uplift you is meant to control you. So how does women thinking that it's embarrassing for men to love them, how does that uplift women? Like, let's just really think about that. It's not like they're advocating for you to depend to like value your friends with women more. They're saying that you should like deny men access to you. Like I said, we're analyzing the title, didn't read the article, so but saying that, men shouldn't have intimate romantic access to you as a woman, how does that uplift you in your desired reality? And maybe some people it does. Maybe that is the solution for some people. I know, especially like if you're queer and you want to lean into your loving women more, 12 out of 10 recommend. So maybe that could be like a phase of your life, but I think to say it's embarrassing is a very powerful word to use here. And I say that because emotions are what give things power over us. And it's not like we're saying like it's just bad to have a boyfriend. It's useless to have a boyfriend. It's inconvenient. It's embarrassing. It's supposed to make you feel shame. It's 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 going to make you feel some type of way that you don't want to feel. But that doesn't have to be true. Especially if it's a man that you respect and value and think that his perspective is like enlightens you or pours into you, because like going back to the law of gender, like we do need masculinity in order to initiate abundance, the multiplication effect of the feminine. And if, I believe that, that masculinity can be expressed within oneself. It could also be expressed by a woman unto like a more feminine woman. I think there is a lot of fluidity within that, but I think especially like Vogue is probably mostly going to be like cis hetero white women in like their 30s reading that shit. And so if they're like straight and then they're like, "Oh, I should be embarrassed that I have a boyfriend," like how is that going to help them live the life that they want? I think that's just some food for thought. And I also think the gender wars are an illusion, but I do feel like it's real in a lot of ways because we make it real, which is like anything in the world. All these complex institutions of domination, from patriarchy, white supremacy, all of it, all the isms and shit. It's only real because we make it real. We subscribe to these identities. We partake in cultures that separate us from others. And just because we make it real, that doesn't mean it's good or bad, but it means that we have a lot of choice in what the implementation of it looks like. So in the gender wars, I feel like it's real because I meet men all the time that are like, well, not all the time, but too many. I've been on dates where boys will be like, well, one time I went on a date with this boy and he was like, oh, for our first date, I'm just gonna take you to get some tacos. The tacos were good. I had a great time. Well, I didn't have a great time because he was kind of weird, but the food was good. Like I literally had zero complaints. And then at the end of the day, he's like, "Yeah, like I had to make sure. I had to make sure I was really fucking with you. Like I wasn't gonna like go all out because hoes just be wanting a free meal." I'm like, and he's like, "I wouldn't call you that, but I'm like, you're insinuating that you would assume. The assumption at the beginning is that yes, I am one of these like girls that just wants a free meal, and it's like, if you don't want that, then don't do that. Don't take women out. Like, but I don't even know how to really get into that. But I guess I just meet a lot of men that assume the worst out of me. And they assume like I'm shallow or I just want superficial things. And I've tried it sort of. I've tried to like, I don't I think everybody's different. I think some women do want that, and I also think that there's nothing wrong with that, especially if you're a man that wants to provide that. And like I said, when you give to women, they multiply with it. And so if you're a man and you choose to provide and to give to a woman, like she's going to take that and fucking like create. And I think that there's something like deeply beautiful about that. But I also feel like there's different ways in which you can give, and I'm definitely not advocating like um I guess what I'm advocating for is not to assume the worst in people. I think that's definitely the general what I'm advocating for, because I feel like I'll talk to my homegirls and they'll be like, "Niggas ain't shit. Niggas are so emotionally unintelligent," and I'm like, "The niggas you're talking to, like, why are you talking to him if you feel that way? Like, you have free will. You can go out, meet other people, and find someone." Or you could take the time and energy to explain to him how to be more emotionally intelligent, but you can never force someone to listen to you. And so I just feel like this law of gender, right? The ability to take the masculine and the feminine, and to, when they're brought together, they reveal new layers of reality, they create new things. We can apply that to the personal, and we can also apply that to the social. Um, so for me, what does that look like? It means nourishing the parts of me that want to be active, but also making sure that I'm resting and that I meditate, or I take time to indulge into my subconscious mind. There's a lot of things that can be done, but if I'm not creating this balance, then I'm not going to be revealing to myself like the reality that I want to live in. I feel like in our patriarchal society, it's very easy to get wrapped up in the doing, doing, doing. Consume, consume, consume. Watch this, eat this, exercise, text your friends, do this. But I think I think the masculine definitely operates more on the material realm, and I think that the feminine is more of the spiritual realm. And if we stay on the material realm, then that's the only place we'll ever be. But if we go to the spiritual realm, then we get to create new layers of reality. We get to create new and see new innovations, and to be in the frequency of different materials. We don't have to be stuck. And I feel like operating from the masculine is definitely, in a way, very stagnant, because like the feminine is very cyclical, it's constantly changing. And so there's just so much potential in the feminine, and that must be respected. And I love respecting that by resting, meditating, reflecting, being in nature, doing breath work. I know for me, like swimming is very meditative. And it's like literally anything could be you diving into your femininity. It's you deciding what that means to you. Because, like I said, I would think like the action of doing is more masculine. But if I'm doing swimming, like I think of that as feminine, because, well, for one, water is like a feminine element, but also just like the tranquility, the way that I feel very connected to my spirit when I am swimming. So, once again, I just feel like gender is this thing that you connect with on your own terms, but there must be a balance if you want to make your life what you desire. You can't become trapped in other people's reality, which I feel like that's what the masculine framework of patriarchy, I feel like that's where that keeps us stuck in the mindset of people that I don't agree with, the patriarchs. I don't agree with a lot of that. So why would I live my life in accordance to what they expect of me? So one thing that I really want to talk about is being in a queer relationship. I am non monogamous and I have a long distance girlfriend. You know, they're very queer, gender fluid. They use they, she pronouns, and their name is Jessie. And I was recently just like meditating on our love and how wonderful it has been healing my femininity alongside this miraculous woman, and how special that is to really dive into my femininity, redefine what that means to me, and to nurture that part of myself in a world that taught me that it is unworthy. And I was thinking about um, relationships with men, and I also date men, but I was just kind of thinking about like women that are doing that with men as their partner, like healing their femininity, or practicing devotion to their femininity alongside a male partner. And I think just the one really special thing about being in a queer relationship is that the relatedness, that my partner knows what it feels like to be attacked by masculinity and dominated within patriarchy, and that I don't have to explain what that feels like, and that we can both, without having to say much, we can both come to one another, discuss what we're unlearning and how we wish to grow and to nurture one another without having to over explain, without having to attempt to justify what we're feeling. I was recently doing a metal workshop, and I told the woman about my project. I'm working on a project about environmental racism and showcasing like Black bodies healing, and kind of taking more of a wider lens of Africanisms and things related to Black culture and healing as an act of resilience and growth as an act of resilience. So I'm working on like making a pair of earrings that look like peanuts, another pair that looks like sugar canes. I made a pennant that is like the Sankofa symbol. So I'm working on this stuff, and this white lady, she asked me, she's like, "Oh, what is your project about?" And so I explained this to her, and like, what do you mean environmental racist? Or I didn't even say that word because white people. Oh God, I'm so funny. I using terms like racism in front of white people can sometimes just lead to like a hostility within them that I don't care to trigger. so I'm like, I'm talking about environmental justice and advocating for Blackness and resilience. And she's like, well, doesn't everybody deal with that? And I don't feel like she was trying to be rude or anything. She's just ignorant, right? And all I said was, like, people of color have to deal with it first. They're dealing with it right now. Climate change is more of a down the line problem for a lot of people. And I will say in LA, it's not for for a lot of white people. Like there's a lot of white people having to deal with fires, of course, but at the same time, which communities are most quickly reinvested into, which communities have the fire, but then also air pollution and then also manufacturing pollution. Where are these companies putting their factories, and who has the power to tell them no? And so I say this because I was just kind of thinking about how I had to explain that to her, and I don't even know if she heard me. Versus when I talk to black people about this project, they're like, oh, that's awesome. Like, I already understand what you're talking about, which I think is just the complexity of art is who is your audience? Do they already know what you're talking about? How do you explain? And so tying this back to gender and like paying devotion to my femininity, I was, you know, really, I remember when I met Yessie, I was taking a step back from my relationships with men. I felt like I was constantly putting myself in dynamics where I was not getting what I wanted, and that was my choice to put myself there. And I also had always wanted to explore my queerness, but I was afraid. And so I just was taking a step back from, kind of dating in general, but also letting things play out as they do. And so when I met Yessie, we would just both talk about like our wounded feminine and feeling dominated. And as we came to one another with so much intention and sincerity and vulnerability, I feel healed in so many ways. And they definitely remind me that I am worthy of exactly what I desire, and that together we can work towards the things that we dream of and envision. And of course, this can be done with a male partner, but I just want to say like how grateful I am that I don't have to explain it. And of course, there's still things that I will explain, especially like being a black woman and our different experiences there. Um, but yeah, but like I was saying as well, you can always find a partner that wants to nurture you and help you heal the things that you're working on. And that gender doesn't have to be a part of that. But I just love queerness because you have to have a lot of fearlessness. And there's a lot of things that are questioned and it's at the forefront. Whereas I feel like even when I still will like go on a date with a man, it's like, okay, he's gonna do this, he's gonna do that, of course. Like he's gonna pay, blah blah blah, whatever. And you know, I just I just love that everything is put into question. And I will say, even like exploring sexuality and kinkiness and things of that nature, I would say something similar where things are not assumed in that space. You have to speak on it, question, and compromise. Yeah. So I just want to leave you off with this question. Um, if femininity is always being forced to react to patriarchy, do we even know what it is and its truth? Well, I hope y'all enjoyed this discussion. If you have any thoughts or want to talk about your gender expression, leave a comment. Feel free to like, share, vibe. I'm so grateful for you to tune in on this consciousness exploration, and I hope to talk to y'all very soon. Peace.